Great Rome, the era of the empire's heyday. You are standing on a narrow night street with your head tilted back, admiring the majestic moon that softly illuminates the marble columns of the distant forum. Suddenly, somewhere high above you, the barely noticeable rustle of an opening wooden shutter is heard. Before you even have time to look up, a bucket of foul smelling domestic sewage rains down on your head from a third floor window. You gasp with indignation, shouting with anger into the darkness. But the street is absolutely empty. Your clothes are hopelessly ruined, and the harsh Roman law at this moment is entirely on the side of the one sitting above. The lawyers of the empire clearly laid down one rule: if you walk under the windows of multi-story buildings during the dark hours of the day, you yourself are responsible for everything that flies onto your head. You try to run forward, hoping to find at least one street torch, but from the deep blackness of the alley, three sullen shadows with short iron knives in their hands are already silently falling in behind you. Your journey into the past began just a couple of hours ago, but you already understand that the Eternal City has prepared a harsh test for you. Why could an ordinary person from our time not survive even 3 days in ancient Rome? Greetings, friends. With you, as always, is Vladislav, the Master Vladislav channel. Today we will go into the very heart of the ancient world to walk along the dirty pavements of the greatest megalopolis of antiquity and find out why the real Rome of the emperor's time was infinitely far from Hollywood movies and why its daily life concealed traps at every turn. By the way, write in the comments where you are watching us from and what time it is now. It is interesting to know what time of day you like to listen to stories. Your 3-day survival in Rome begins with the most basic, most primal human need. You need to find a safe roof over your head before total darkness sets in. When hearing the word Rome, most modern people imagine spacious patrician villas, luxurious courtyards with murmuring fountains, perfect mosaic floors, and cool shaded gardens where slaves serve wine in silver goblets. But the reality is that such elite mansions occupied barely 1% of the entire vast area of the city. They belong to senators, military commanders, wealthy equestrians, and the highest aristocracy. The ordinary Rome, however, in which the life of a million people bustled and boiled, grew completely differently. It did not grow wide, it desperately climbed upward. Your destination for these 3 days is called an insula. This is an ancient multi-story building, the bleak great-grandmother of modern residential apartment blocks, and it is precisely what will become your first test of endurance. You turn off the wide stone-paved square and venture deep into Subura. This is the most densely populated, the loudest, and the most dangerous district of the Eternal City. The sun is already rapidly setting behind the hills, painting the sky in crimson tones, and you need to hurry to take your room. Land in Rome costs absolutely astronomical money. Therefore, enterprising and incredibly greedy Roman landlords squeezed the maximum possible profit out of every square meter. They built houses right next to each other, wall to wall, causing the streets between them to turn into narrow, dark, and damp crevices. Sunlight did not penetrate these alleys even on the hottest summer noon. You approach a huge building overhanging the street. This is your insula. It rises 5 or perhaps even all of 6 floors up. Its facade looks menacing. The upper floors project forward, overhanging the lower ones, creating the feeling that this entire colossal structure is about to collapse right onto the pavement. Wooden balconies are stuck to the walls like birds' nests. They are warped and blackened by time and dampness. You open the heavy, creaking wooden door and begin your ascent. On the ground floor of the Insula, there are tabernae, street shops, cheap eateries, and artisan workshops. It is incredibly noisy here. A thick, heavy smell of fried olive oil, cheap sour wine, unwashed bodies, and raw leather hangs in the air. Right there, behind the sturdy stone walls of the ground floor, live more or less affluent tenants. The lower the floor in a Roman apartment building, the more expensive the rent, and the more prestigious and safe the housing is considered. The residents of the ground floor even have access to running water and some furniture, but you don't have a jingling bag of gold sesterces in your pocket, so your path inexorably leads to the very top. With every flight of stairs, the surrounding reality becomes increasingly bleak. The wide stone steps are quickly replaced by shaky, rotten wooden planks that creak pitifully under the weight of your footsteps. The walls around you become frighteningly thin. Cheap plaster crumbles at the slightest touch, and the ceilings drop so low that you have to constantly bow your head to avoid hitting the rough beams. Pitch darkness reigns in the corridors. There were almost no windows on the stairwells in Insula, so as not to weaken the already fragile load-bearing structure of the building. You walk literally by touch, inhaling stale, stagnant air in which the smells of mold, smoke, and human sweat are mixed. Finally, you reach the fifth floor, right under the clay roof tiles, baked hot during the day. You push the flimsy door and enter your cubicle. This is a tiny claustrophobic space where a narrow couch with a hard straw mattress barely fits. There's no table, no chair, and no chest for belongings in the room. A suffocating, heavy atmosphere reigns here. In Roman Insula there was not, and fundamentally could not be, central heating, kitchens, private toilets, or running water on the upper floors. All these incredible benefits of ancient civilization, so admired by modern historians, were intended exclusively for wealthy villas and grandiose public buildings. An ordinary Roman lived in conditions that today would seem unbearable, even for a temporary overnight stay. You sit on the edge of the hard couch and listen to the sounds of the house. The walls of this insula are made of so-called raw masonry. This is a cheap, unstable mixture of broken, unbaked brick, all kinds of construction debris, twigs, and very liquid clay mortar. The famous Roman architect Vitruvius, in his multi-volume works, bitterly lamented and nearly wept over exactly how these tenement houses were built. For the sake of maximum savings, greedy contractors made the walls on the upper floors only half a brick thick. Because of this, you hear absolutely everything happening with your numerous neighbors on all sides. Behind the wall on the right, a tired married couple is arguing loudly and emotionally. On the left, someone is coughing hackingly and heavily. And above, right over your head, huge rats fattened on city dumps confidently scurry along the rotten wooden floor beams. But acoustic discomfort and cramped conditions are the least of your current problems. The main, invisible, and most terrifying enemy patiently waiting for you in this small room is the constant split-second threat of the entire building instantly collapsing. Roman insulae were built in a hurry, often at night, bypassing building codes, out of the rawest and poorly dried materials. Landlords scrimped on foundations, failing to account for the soft soil and proximity of groundwater. The city never sleeps quietly, due to the constant vibration from heavy cargo carts with forged iron wheels passing through the night streets. The foundations of the houses were methodically destroyed. The walls developed deep, yawning cracks, and multi-ton buildings tilted toward the road, supported only by wooden shores placed right on the sidewalks. And at one far from beautiful moment, this entire colossal structure would collapse inward like a house of cards from a light puff of wind. In the Rome of the early emperor's era, the collapse of huge residential multi-story buildings was such a frequent and commonplace occurrence that city chronicles recorded it simply as a minor, insignificant incident. You lie down on the scratchy mattress, look at the cracked ceiling, and clearly realize if in the middle of this night the foundation of the rotten giant fails to withstand another vibration, tons of brick, clay, and wood will bury you beneath them in a fraction of a second. And the most terrifying thing is that in this huge megalopolis, no one will even rush to clear the rubble to save you. Your room will become your grave. The second deadly danger of your insula is merciless fire. In winter, despite the southern climate, Rome can be truly cold, damp, and chilly. Icy winds blow right through the thin walls. To get at least a little warm in their unheated cubicle and not freeze in their sleep, your neighbors on the floor light open clay. Brazier pans generously filled with charcoal. Everywhere in the tiny rooms, cheap oil lamps flicker, often falling over from the slightest draft. It only takes one very tired or drunk poor man on the third floor to accidentally bump into such a red-hot brazier with his foot, and the old bone-dry wooden floors of the house catch fire like good gunpowder. Fires occurred in Rome every single day, destroying not just individual buildings, but entire densely built-up neighborhoods. The fire leaped from balcony to balcony with incredible speed, and if you live on the fifth floor, you have practically no chance of escaping. The narrow, rotten wooden staircase instantly turns into a roaring fire chimney with incredible draft, through which suffocating, dense black smoke rushes upward. Professional fire brigades in our modern familiar sense simply did not exist in Rome for a long time. Emperor Augustus created detachments of the so-called vigiles, night watchmen, but they did not save people. They ran to the site of a gigantic fire with primitive leather buckets, gaffs, and heavy axes. Their main and only task was not to extinguish the burning insula, but to quickly demolish neighboring, still intact buildings. They created an empty firebreak zone so that the wall of fire would not spread to the luxurious marble palaces and temples of the elite. People trapped on the upper floors were left one-on-one with the elements. You fall asleep to the monotonous, lulling crackle of coals in others' braziers behind the wall, realizing that your room is an ideal thermal trap from which no physical exit exists. When early morning comes, you wake up to find your cubicle tightly packed with acrid, eye-stinging gray smoke. No, fortunately, a fire has not started. It is just that hundreds of people in your huge house woke up at the same time and lit their primitive hearths to cook a meager, cheap breakfast. There were no chimneys in the Insula. All the acrid fumes, soot, and toxic products of charcoal combustion vented directly into the rooms, and from there crawled through door cracks and tiny ventilation holes into the corridors, turning the stairwells into a true foggy labyrinth. You cough heavily, trying to clear your lungs. Your eyes water unbearably, and your head splits into pieces from the lack of fresh oxygen and mild carbon monoxide poisoning. The walls of the room are covered with a thick layer of black, greasy soot, which is now settling on your skin as well. You realize that you cannot stay in this stone trap for another minute. You miraculously survive the first most terrifying night in the ancient multi-story building, but a long new day and a completely new trial await you ahead. You get up from the hard couch, shake the straw off your clothes, and descend the shaky, creaking staircase down to the noisy street of the Eternal City, flooded with morning light. Only one obsessive thought pulses in your head: where in this megalopolis to find food that will not send you to a hospital bed, to local doctors in the very first hours of your stay in ancient Rome. You step out of the gloomy, damp-smelling entrance of your insula, and the deafening roar of morning Rome instantly crashes upon you. The bright, merciless Mediterranean sun hits your eyes, blinding you after the pitch darkness of the stair flights. The narrow street of Subura is already bustling with life. From all sides, merchants shout, donkeys bray, and porters swear in a Latin unfamiliar to you as they force their way through the dense crowd. Your stomach tightens with a treacherous spasm. Yesterday took too much energy, and the night spent in constant fear of the building collapsing burned your last calories. You urgently need to find food. In the popular consciousness of modern man, Roman culinary art is forever linked with grandiose, decadent feasts. We imagine patricians reclining on silk cushions, to whom slaves bring a never-ending line of roasted peacocks, flamingo tongues, the freshest oysters on ice, and exotic fruits on silver platters. But the truth is that this gastronomic luxury was available only to a tiny handful of the chosen few. For 99% of the empire's population, of which you are now a part, every meal was a game of Russian roulette with one's own health. There's neither a stove nor a hearth in your tiny room under the roof. Making a fire there is equivalent to suicide. Therefore, like hundreds of thousands of other ordinary Romans, you are forced to eat exclusively on the street. You join the flow of people and follow the smell of smoke, hoping to find a local eatery. The Romans called such places popinae or thermopolia. This is the ancient analog of modern fast food. Soon you notice an open establishment on the corner of a busy intersection. The main feature of any popina is a massive L-shaped stone counter, lined with pieces of cheap marble. Deeply embedded in this counter are pot-bellied terracotta jars, dolya, in which hot food and drinks are kept. Clouds of fat, brazen flies swarm around the counter. The dirt underfoot is mixed with scraps that patrons simply toss onto the floor. The owner of the establishment, an obese man in a greasy tunic, loudly calls out to passers-by. You step closer. Pieces of pork sizzle on open coals behind the counter. In your time, you are used to the perfect process of cooking meat over a fire. You know a thing or two about how to choose a fresh cut, how to mix the perfect marinade from fragrant spices so that the meat turns out juicy with an appetizing golden crust and the noble scent of smoke from high-quality firewood. You subconsciously expect to smell that familiar, appetite-inducing aroma of properly grilled pork. But what hits your nose here makes you instinctively recoil. The smell of meat is overpowered by a thick, sickening stench of rot, unwashed bodies, and sour wine. Meat in ancient Rome was an expensive luxury for a poor person, and under the conditions of street heat and a total absence of refrigerators, it spoiled at a catastrophic speed. The owners of Thermopolia never threw away slightly tainted goods. They simply fried it to the state of a black boot sole to kill the external signs of decay. But to hide the vile aftertaste, they needed something stronger than fire. You asked to be served the simplest and, in your opinion, safest food, a flatbread and a piece of that very meat. The owner nods and pulls a round loaf from under the counter. Roman bread, panis, looks quite appetizing. It even has a bakery stamp on it, but when you break off a piece and start chewing, your jaws lock up from surprise. A loud, distinct crunch echoes in your teeth. It feels like you're chewing sandpaper. The thing is, bread in Rome was sold by weight. Flour was expensive, and state grain doles did not cover the needs of all citizens by far. Therefore, cunning millers and bakers resorted to monstrous tricks for the sake of extra profit. To make the loaf weigh more, fine river sand, crushed chalk, white clay, and sometimes even construction plaster were generously, unsparingly mixed into the dough during the kneading stage. For the Roman poor, this was an absolute norm. They ate this stone bread every day from early childhood. This abrasive trash worked like a ruthless file. If you could look inside the mouth of a typical 30-year-old Roman, you would be horrified. Due to the daily consumption of bread with sand, their teeth were worn down to the very gums. Tooth decay was not as terrible as the mechanical wearing away of enamel, which led to constant inflammation, hellish pain, and tooth loss in the very prime of life. Roman dentistry offered only two ways: endure the pain or have the tooth pulled with red-hot forceps without any anesthesia. You swallow the tough piece, feeling the sand scratch your throat, and shift your gaze to the meat. The piece of pork lies on a crude clay plate. Before giving it to you, the owner of the popina generously pours a thick dark liquid over the meat from a small jug. This is garum, the main culinary fetish of ancient Rome. Not a single dish could do without this sauce. It was added even to desserts. And it is precisely this sauce that is the cause of the incredible gastronomic catastrophe you are currently in. Garum cost different amounts. There was an elite sauce for patricians, and there was a cheap street version for those like you. But its production technology always remained unchanged and would shock any modern sanitary inspectorate. Garum was made from fish. More precisely, from fish blood, intestines, gills, and all kinds of small waste left over after cleaning the catch. This bloody, slimy mass was tightly packed into huge stone vats under the open sky, generously sprinkled with salt, and left for several months under the scorching Mediterranean sun. The fermentation process was continuous. The fish entrails literally rotted and dissolved in their own juice under the influence of bacteria and enzymes. The smell during this process was so unbearable, so apocalyptic, that Roman laws strictly forbade the production of garum within the city limits. Sauce factories were moved outside the city walls, closer to the sea, so that the wind would carry the stench away. When the biomass turned into a homogeneous mush, the dark liquid was strained off it. This was garum. You bring the piece of meat to your face. The smell of fermented, half-decayed fish hits your sense of smell so strongly that tears well up in your eyes. Why did the Romans pour this putrid extract over all their food? The answer is simple and pragmatic. Garum was incredibly rich in naturally occurring monosodium glutamate. It acted as a powerful flavor enhancer. Its aggressive, sharp aroma perfectly masked the taste of spoiled meat, rancid fat, or old grain. It allowed the poor to eat what would have caused instant vomiting in its pure form. You squeeze your eyes shut, hold your breath, and take a bite. Salt, spices, and the taste of fish rot explode in your mouth, completely overpowering the real taste of the meat. Your stomach rumbles unhappily, accepting this heavy, suspicious mixture, the likes of which your modern digestive system has never encountered in its life. The food gets stuck in your throat, sand crunches on your teeth, and you are desperately thirsty. Clean water in Rome, the famous water from the aqueducts, flowed in fountains. But drinking raw water in a densely populated district where sewage flows down the streets meant voluntarily signing your own death warrant. The water absolutely had to be sanitized, and the Romans did this with the help of wine. You ask the owner for a cup of wine. He scoops a muddy, reddish-brown liquid from the jar embedded in the counter. This is not the noble, aged wine we are used to. For the street poor, they served posca. Essentially, it was wine vinegar heavily diluted with water. The drink was sour and sharp, but it quenched thirst perfectly and killed most bacteria. You take a cautious sip and freeze in surprise. The wine turns out not to be sour at all. It possesses an incredibly pleasant, deep, and rich sweet taste. This sweetness softly coats the tongue, hiding all the flaws of the cheap swill. It seems to you that the establishment's owner has shown you unprecedented generosity and added expensive honey to your cup. But you are cruelly mistaken. This sweetness is the taste of a slow, inescapable death that has already begun to circulate through your veins. The Romans did not know sugar. Honey was far from available to everyone, but they adored sweets, and they found a brilliant, as it seemed to them, way out. They created the frutum and sapa. This was grape must that was boiled down over a slow fire for a long time to the state of a thick, sweet syrup. This syrup was then generously added to cheap, sour wine to improve its taste, and was also used as a preservative. But the whole horror was hidden in the technology of preparing this syrup. Ancient cookbooks strictly prescribed the must could be boiled down only and exclusively in lead cauldrons. If copper or bronze cookware was used, the syrup acquired a nasty metallic aftertaste. Lead, on the other hand, entered into a complex chemical reaction with the acids of the grape juice. In the process of this slow boiling, lead acetate was formed. Chemists call this substance lead sugar. It truly possesses a bright, pronounced sweet taste. You stand in the middle of a dirty Roman street, drinking this pleasant Swedish wine, and you don't even suspect that you are pouring a horse dose of a heavy neurotoxin into yourself. Lead is not excreted from the human body. It accumulates in the bones, liver, and brain. Lead poisoning, Saturnism, was the invisible curse of the Roman Empire. Lead was everywhere. Water pipes in the houses of the rich were made of it, cookware was cast from it, and amphorae were sealed with it. But it was precisely lead sugar in wine that dealt the most devastating blow. The daily consumption of such drink led to catastrophic consequences. First, you will feel an inexplicable chronic fatigue. Your joints will begin to ache even after a light walk. Then sharp, unbearable abdominal pains will come, which Roman doctors mistook for common indigestion. Lead slowly but surely destroys the nervous system. Many noble Romans who drank boiled down wine by the liter every day developed psychoses, fits of uncontrolled aggression, paranoia, and deep depression. Some historians seriously believe that it was precisely the mass, rampant lead poisoning that led to the madness of many Roman emperors and ultimately to the decline of the empire itself. The nation literally went mad trying to sweeten its life. Your stomach, struggling to digest the coarse bread with sand and old meat under the putrid fish sauce garum, begins to send very alarming and unambiguous signals. The Roman midday sun has heated the narrow stone streets to the state of a veritable oven. The thick, suffocating dust of Subura has settled in a thick layer on your sweaty skin, mixing with sticky spots from spilled cheap sweet wine. Every step echoes with a leaden heaviness in your legs, and a treacherous, tugging pain is building up in your stomach, demanding an immediate solution. In your familiar modern world, this natural physiological urge is resolved extremely simply and comfortably. You find a secluded, clean, securely locked cubicle with white porcelain, soft toilet paper, and running water, where you are left one-on-one with your thoughts. But you are in ancient Rome. And here, even the most intimate, hidden process of human vital activity is turned into a public, incredibly dangerous trial that is utterly shocking to the modern mind. You urgently need to find a Roman public toilet, which the locals call a latrina or fornica. You turn the corner of a massive brick basilica building and see a wide open archway from which the hum of dozens of voices, loud laughter, and the continuous trickling of water emanate. You step closer and freeze in complete indecision. What opens up to your gaze completely clashes with the true physiological function of this place. The spacious, bright hall with high vaults is richly decorated with magnificent colorful frescoes depicting peaceful rivers, forests, and mythical heroes. An intricate, incredibly expensive geometric mosaic is carefully laid out on the floor. Small decorative fountains murmur along the painted walls, and elegant marble statues of patron gods stand in the corners of the room. It seems that you have mistakenly entered a hall for philosophical debates, a library, or the grand reception room of a very wealthy and influential patrician. But the smell? A heavy, suffocating, dense, hitting straight to the nose, concentrated stench of ammonia, stale urine, and hydrogen sulfide quickly and ruthlessly returns you to the harsh, ancient reality. This is the main public toilet of this densely populated district, designed for the simultaneous presence of 50 and sometimes even 80 people. You take a hesitant step inside and freeze near the entrance, gripped by deep culture shock. Along all four walls of this huge, luxurious hall stretches a continuous solid stone or marble bench. In this long bench, round yawning openings are neatly cut out at equal, frighteningly close distances from one another. No partitions, no doors, no individual cubicles, absolutely no privacy and personal space. Right now, dozens of completely unfamiliar men are sitting on these stone openings. They sit shoulder to shoulder, their long tunics carelessly hitched up, and their knees are practically touching. Here, any social division and class inequality is completely erased. Next to an incredibly wealthy merchant in fine imported wool, a port docker covered in coal dust can sit quite calmly. And next to a gray-haired philosopher deep in his lofty thoughts, a grim, scar-covered legionnaire has taken his place. And all of them are occupied with their dirtiest business in plain sight of everyone, not being ashamed of it in the least. For an ancient Roman, a trip to the public latrine was not an intimate necessity to be hidden, but a very important social procedure. It was the main place for socializing, a stormy exchange of the latest city gossip, concluding small commercial deals, debating politics, and even receiving invitations to free dinner parties. You stand in a daze and see how two people, directly opposite you, sitting tensely on the stone openings, are animatedly and very loudly discussing the recent bloody gladiatorial fights in the Colosseum, actively waving their free hands. Someone in the corner reads new poems aloud with expression. Someone eats a street-bought flatbread right during the process of defecation, not bothered in the least by the severe lack of sanitation reigning around. The noise level is so high, it's as if you have ended up at a busy meat market rather than a privy. Your stomach, tormented by sand and lead, is ruthlessly spasming again. You simply have no other choice. You find the only vacant opening between two incredibly obese, loudly arguing townspeople, awkwardly and shamefully hitch up your clothes and sit down on the cold, damp with someone else's sweat marble stone. But the most terrifying, most disgusting trial awaits you ahead when your physiological process is complete. In your home time, there's soft, multi-layered paper, wet cleansing wipes, powerful alcohol-based antiseptics, and hot water. The Romans did not know paper. Papyrus brought from Egypt was too expensive a luxury to use for such base and dirty purposes. With a sinking heart, you lower your gaze and see a narrow stone channel carved into the mosaic floor right in front of your dusty feet. Through this channel, a continuous, bubbling stream of murky, gray water flows. And in this water, like little ominous boats, float real instruments of torture for any modern, unprepared immune system. These are the famous xylospongia. A xylospongium is a perfectly ordinary short wooden stick, onto the end of which a porous sea sponge is firmly secured with a piece of rope. This is the ancient, harsh analog of toilet paper. And the main deadly problem is that these sponges are reusable and absolutely 100% public. A single such stick with a sponge serves hundreds, or maybe even thousands, of completely different people with a wide variety of health conditions during a long Roman day. The Roman sitting to your left grunts heavily, finishes his business, calmly takes a wet stick from the channel, uses it for its direct purpose, and then simply rinses it slightly in the running water at his feet. Sometimes in the latrines there stood a bucket with a murky, long-stale solution of vinegar and coarse salt where the sponge was dipped for disinfection. After this token cleaning, the neighbor simply throws the dirty stick back into the running channel so that the next visitor in need can freely take it. That means you. Your modern, enlightened mind categorically refuses to accept this ghastly biological reality. You understand perfectly well that this soft, constantly wet, porous sea sponge is an ideal incubator, unsurpassed in nature, for millions of deadly bacteria. Like a magnet, it absorbs microscopic parasite eggs, pathogens of dysentery, deadly cholera, typhoid fever, and severe hepatitis. A light rinse in a weak solution of old vinegar does not kill even a tenth of these microorganisms. It merely preserves them until the next use. The use of a public xylospongium was the most frequent, the primary cause of the colossal, uncontrolled spread of severe intestinal infections and helminths among the entire vast population of the empire. Modern archaeologists, carefully examining fossilized organic remains in ancient Roman sewers, find an incredible, frightening number of intact whipworm and huge roundworm eggs. Internal parasites literally devoured Romans alive from the inside, robbing them of strength and health. And the main, uninterrupted channel for their spread was these beautiful public toilets, finished with expensive marble and decorated with frescoes. You look with horror at the brown, dirty sponge slowly floating past you in the channel. Your stomach tightens into a tight, icy knot of primal fear. You realize that it is better to use the hems of your own tunic or tough leaves from a tree on the street than to touch this perfect weapon of mass biological contamination, even with the tip of your finger. But bacteria and other ravenous parasites on the sponge are a quiet threat, delayed in time. In the luxurious Roman latrines, there also existed perfectly real, instantaneous physical dangers that could maim or deprive you of life right on the spot, while you carry on a leisurely, social conversation with your neighbor. You sit on a stone opening, and deep beneath you lies the dark, damp abyss of the main sewer collector. The ancient Romans did not have the water traps and curved siphons familiar to us that reliably block odors and hazardous gases in modern porcelain toilets. The sewage channels overflowing with thousands of tons of rotting human waste, discarded food scraps, and the corpses of small street animals continuously produced gigantic volumes of volatile methane and toxic hydrogen sulfide in the process of decomposition. This combustible gas went nowhere. It packed tightly and accumulated in the narrow enclosed stone pipes directly beneath the latrines. On hot, windless summer days, the concentration of methane beneath the floor reached its critical, explosive values. And at this tense moment, the slightest accidental spark from a tossed torch, from the strike of a hobnailed boot against stone, or from a dropped oil lamp led to a local but very painful catastrophe. From the deep stone opening, right beneath a sitting, unsuspecting person, a huge pillar of scorching blue flame could suddenly burst forth with a roar. The Romans, having not the slightest concept of the chemical nature of methane and the processes of decay, were in absolute superstitious horror of these mysterious explosions. They sincerely believed that in the deep drains of the Roman sewer system, inaccessible to light, lived real, wicked demons of the underworld, who periodically breathed out hellfire to punish sinful or careless people. To somehow appease these ferocious demons, protective symbols were very often painted on the walls of public toilets, depicting the goddess of luck, Fortuna, or writing long magical spells to ward off evil spirits. You sit on this cold stone slab, inhaling ammonia, and clearly realize that you are sitting right on top of a huge gas powder keg that could silently explode and leave terrible burns on your body forever at any random second. If the underground fire does not burst forth, something far more tangible, alive, and no less frightening could emerge from the yawning black hole beneath you. The dark, warm, and incredibly well-fed Roman drains were an ideal home for massive hordes of giant rats, wild snakes, and venomous centipedes. These creatures, drawn by the warmth of human bodies and the smell of food that Romans carelessly brought along with them right into the toilet, often climbed up the slippery, slime-covered walls of the stone drains. They made their way directly to the people sitting on the openings in search of sustenance. Sudden bites from huge sewer rats on the most vulnerable, exposed parts of the body were perfectly common, albeit extremely unpleasant, occurrence in Roman latrines. An infection from such a dirty bite under the harsh conditions of ancient medicine, which knew no antibiotics, meant an agonizing, long, and incredibly painful death from blood poisoning. You flinch nervously at every, even the quietest, suspicious splash somewhere in the impenetrable depth of the pipe beneath you. Alternatively, with trembling hands, you finish your business, fastidiously wiping yourself with a piece of your own clean fabric that you tore from the lower hem of your tunic. You don't care about the ruined clothes. You bolt like a bullet out of this magnificent marble crypt into the fresh street air, pushing through the crowd of entering townspeople. Your lungs greedily swallow the hot, dusty street air of Rome, which now seems crystal clear and fresh to you compared to the ammonia gas chamber of the public toilet. You survive the latrine, but your main hygiene problem is still unsolved. Your skin is unbearably itchy from dried sweat, thick road dust, ingrained soot from your nightly insula, and that sticky, cold fear you have just experienced. You need to wash this city off yourself immediately. You need to take a real bath to feel human. And for this, there's only one suitable place in Rome, the famous Roman Thermae, celebrated by poets, gigantic public baths, luxurious palaces of water, which cunning emperors built with their own money in order to buy the loyalty and love of the common people. You walk for a long time along twisting streets and finally emerge at a huge, incredibly majestic, and overwhelmingly large complex of buildings that monumentally towers over the cramped, dirty quarters of Subura. The entrance to this palace of health costs a mere pittance. The fee is just a quarter of an ace, the smallest and most insignificant copper coin of the vast empire. Thanks to such a low price, the baths are accessible absolutely to everyone without exception, from penniless artisan apprentices to influential senators. You pass through tall colonnades decorated with stucco work and enter a spacious courtyard. You are instantly deafened by an incredible multi-voiced noise. A resonant echo carries the clatter of hundreds of wooden sandals on marble slabs, the straining cries of vendors selling cheap flatbreads and aromatic oil, the clear splashing of falling water, the heavy groans of masseurs kneading clients' muscles, and loud, booming laughter. Roman Thermae were not just a place for utilitarian washing. They were a gigantic entertainment center, a noisy social club, a place for gossip, and a sports complex all at once. Citizens spent long hours here every day. You hesitantly enter the apoditerium, the spacious men's changing room. This is a long elongated hall with stone benches along the walls and even rows of deep square niches carved right into the masonry. This is where visitors put their outer clothing and shoes before proceeding into the halls with water. You take off your dusty tunic, reeking of sour sweat and rotten fish, carefully roll it into a tight bundle, and place it in a vacant dark niche. But you absolutely cannot just leave, leaving your things unattended. Ancient Thermae were literally swarming with the professional, incredibly agile thieves called capsari. They infiltrated the changing rooms under the guise of ordinary, respectable citizens, and with lightning speed stole any clothes left without proper supervision, to end up completely naked, shoeless, and without a single coin in the center of a huge, indifferent Roman complex meant complete life, fiasco, and shame. Therefore, you are forced to hire one of the specially trained sturdy slaves for a couple of extra copper coins. He sits next to your niche to sternly guard your miserable rags while you undergo the cleansing procedures. According to unshakable Roman tradition, before plunging into water, one had to sweat thoroughly and warm up the muscles. You walk completely naked out into the sun-drenched courtyard, the palaestra. Here, under the scorching rays, hundreds of strong men are actively engaging in physical exercises. Breathing heavily, they lift huge, hewn stones, wrestle fiercely on the dry sand, and laughingly play with a primitive ball made from an ox bladder tightly stuffed with bird feathers. You decide to follow their example and run a couple of laps around the blazing hot yard. Fine dust kicked up by the heavy feet of the wrestlers instantly settles in a thick layer on your damp, sweaty body. To protect their skin from the scorching sun and sticking dirt, Romans liberally coated themselves from head to toe with the cheapest, unrefined olive oil. You take some oil from the public jars and rub this heavy, incredibly thick, and odorous substance into yourself as well. Now your body is tightly covered in a thick, shiny, and sticky armor made of your own sweat, yellow bitter oil, street dust, and dirty sand from the palaestra. You breathe heavily, your heart beats faster. Now you are fully ready for the main, radical stage of cleansing. You head to the caldarium, the hottest steam room in the entire complex. As soon as you cross the high threshold of this small room without windows, a scorching heavy wave of unbearably hot, humid heat hits you with force right in the face. The marble floor beneath your feet is so white hot that it is physically impossible to stand on it with bare soles for more than a few seconds. Therefore, you put on beforehand the special wooden sandals with very thick wooden soles handed out at the entrance. The secret of this incredible, enveloping heat is hidden deep beneath the floor of the steam room. There, the ingenious, engineeringly flawless, but absolutely ruthless toward human lives, hypocause system operates continuously. The massive floor of the caldarium is supported by hundreds of short, neatly stacked brick pillars, and beneath them, in a narrow, low, incredibly dark dungeon without the slightest access to daylight or fresh air, Stoker's slaves labor under inhuman, hellish conditions. Throwing out their backs, they non-stop, day and night, toss huge dry logs into gigantic, ravenous, blazing furnaces. The fire roaring and the white-hot, suffocating smoke, along with the heat, rushes into the hollows beneath the marble floor and into special hollow ceramic pipes skillfully embedded right into the walls of the hall around you. Dry heat emanates from these walls with such force that it is impossible even to touch the marble lining without receiving a serious burn. The nameless slaves deep below live for a very short time. They die agonizingly from suffocation, regular heat strokes, smoke poisoning, and critical dehydration, so that you can comfortably enjoy the hot, relaxing steam above. All the luxury of Rome was always built on invisible bones. You carefully sit down on a hot marble bench, hidden in a thick, swirling white fog. Your pores open up to the maximum under the influence of the critical temperature, and sweat flows down your face and back in real streams, mixing with the rubbed-in oil and sand. Soap familiar to you did not exist in principle in ancient Rome. It simply had not been invented yet. The Gauls knew about soap making, but the Romans considered it barbarism. To effectively cleanse the human body of this terrifying dirty crust, the Romans used a mechanical procedure that looked more like a sadistic skinning. Through the steam, a bath attendant approaches you, an incredibly strong and stern, muscular slave. In his rough hands, a strigil gleams ominously. This is a special curved metal sickle with a blunt blade made of heavy bronze or cheap iron. The slave stands behind you and begins methodically, with immense physical force, scraping the dirty mixture of oil, sweat, and dead skin cells from your body. The hard metal scraper passes harshly with an unpleasant grating sound over your back, chest, and tired legs, leaving behind wide, red, aching streaks. This is a highly painful, extremely rough, and unpleasant cleansing procedure. After it, your skin burns like fire and becomes frighteningly sensitive, but you truly feel that the upper, densest layer of city street grime has finally been stripped from your body. Now you need to wash off the sticky remnants of sweat and cool down a bit after the hellish heat of the caldarium. You move into the tepidarium, a spacious, richly lit hall with warm, comfortable water. In the middle of this hall is a huge marble pool, splendidly finished with mosaics and filled with stagnant water roughly waist deep. In it, dozens of steamed out, naked men are already actively splashing around, sitting on the steps and talking animatedly. With relief, you descend the slippery steps into the warm water that incredibly relaxes your tense muscles. Close your eyes and think that this is it. Finally true, legendary Roman bliss. But your naive, modern illusion shatters into 1,000 pieces when you open your eyes and closely inspect the quality and color of this water. In your safe modern world, any public pool, even the cheapest one, is heavily chlorinated with powerful chemicals filtered by complex systems and constantly cleaned to kill any dangerous bacteria. In ancient Rome, the water in the baths, especially in such huge common pools, was not changed for weeks, and sometimes even for whole long months. Yes, fresh water continuously came in from high aqueducts, but it merely diluted slightly that monstrous, thick biological broth that was contained in the huge stone basin. You sit in a very warm, murky liquid, the temperature of which is an absolutely perfect greenhouse like environment for the rapid reproduction of absolutely any bacteria and viruses known to science. With disgust, you notice that the water around you has a strange, frightening yellowish gray hue, and floating on its surface, shimmering in the light of the lamps, is a thick, iridescent, oily film. This is the olive oil washed off others' dirty bodies. Acrid sweat, shed hair, phlegm, saliva, and millions of microscopic skin flakes from hundreds and thousands of people who bathed here before you since early morning. But the most gruesome, blood-chilling discovery awaits you when you look around at your neighbors in this warm pool. The famous Roman physician Celsus, an indisputable authority of that time, in his bulky medical treatises, persistently and convincingly recommended that all sick people actively visit public thermae for speedier healing of severe ailments with hot water. In reality, this meant that the Thermae served as the primary free ancient hospital for the whole of Rome. Right now, sitting in the same cramped pool with you are people with open, bleeding, and festering wounds, hastily bandaged with dirty rags soaked in pus. Right next to you, a man with a severe form of contagious skin eczema is lightheartedly splashing around, his back completely covered in red, inflamed scabs. A bit further away, a thin old man sits and coughs hackingly and with blood, clearly suffering from an open form of progressive tuberculosis. The water in the luxurious Roman Thermae was a 100% thick concentrate of absolutely all diseases existing in the vast empire, from mundane syphilis to deadly gangrene and leprosy. And this incredibly warm, totally infected water is right now freely penetrating all your open pores, washing your vulnerable mucous membranes and flowing deep into any random, fresh bleeding scratches on your body that the rough metal striggle scraper has just left behind. You came here hoping to wash off the harmless dust of a single day, but instead you voluntarily plunged into a reservoir of biological weapons of mass destruction, thoughtfully and snugly heated by suffocating slaves in underground furnaces. You are seized by the wild, uncontrollable panic of a modern human who has realized the scale of the biological threat. You leap out of this warm, hotbed of infections like someone badly scalded with boiling water and run to the next final hall of the complex, the Frigidarium. This is a tall, cold room with a pool filled with icy, unheated water. According to strict Roman medical tradition, a sharp, shocking temperature drop was supposed to quickly close the steamed-out pores, halt infections, and strengthen the martial spirit. You dive headlong into the icy water, desperately hoping that the aggressive cold will kill at least a small portion of those invisible, microscopic monsters that are now living freely on your defenseless skin. The water mercilessly burns with cold. Your heart stops for a second from deep thermal shock. You surface abruptly, gasping and breathing heavily, and quickly step out of the icy pool onto the dry stone floor. Silent slaves obligingly wipe your shivering body with stiff linen towels. And you try not to think about the fact that these very same towels have already been used before you by dozens of other sick and healthy visitors. You quickly dress in your old crumpled tunic, which the thieving Capsarius reluctantly returned to you, and walk at a fast pace out onto the street. Your body shivers slightly from the sharp temperature drop. Your skin is unpleasantly tight, itches with irritation, and smells of dampness, someone else's cheap, rancid oil, and old rusty metal from the scraper. You stop and look back at the magnificent, white marble gleaming grand facade of the Thermae. For any ancient person, it was a sacred temple of cleanliness, health, and the highest benefit of civilization. For you, a person from the future who knows perfectly well about microbiology, viruses, and infections, it is a grandiose, beautifully marble decorated machine for the deadly exchange of intestinal parasites and incurable diseases. The sun has completely disappeared behind the horizon, and Rome has instantly transformed into a different space. Noisy merchants disappeared, the disputes of philosophers fell silent, and the crowds of citizens subsided. But the night nightmare came to replace the daytime chaos, compared to which even the lack of sanitation in the Thermae seems like child's play. In ancient Rome, there was no street lighting. As soon as darkness fell, the city plunged into a pitch, primal darkness that not even rare oil lamps in the windows of houses could pierce. It was an absolute tangible blackness in which you could not see your own hands. You try to make your way to your insula, navigating only by tactile sensations, touching the dirty walls of the houses. And here you understand why the Roman streets rumbled so loudly during the day. A curfew for heavy transport was the law. Huge cargo carts that brought in goods, grain, and building materials were strictly forbidden to enter the city during daylight hours so as not to create unbearable traffic jams in the narrow alleys. This entire heavy army of multi-ton wagons, clanking with iron wheels, came to life only at night. You hear a deafening, fractional clatter of iron-shod wheels on the cobblestones. They race through the darkness. The drivers see nothing further than the noses of their horses. The wagons fly at incredible speed, turning the streets into an obstacle course. If you gawk, a heavy cart will simply crush you into a pancake without even noticing. Roman poets complained in their satires that because of this rumble, the screeching of axles, and the shouts of carters, it was impossible for any person whose house faced the roadway to fall asleep in Rome. You press against the wall, letting another heavy load pass, and at that moment, a window flies open, right above your head. A warning cry rings out, and a second later, a stream of the contents of a chamber pot crashes onto the sidewalk, centimeters from your feet. There is no system for domestic waste removal in Rome. The residents of the upper floors of Insula are not going to descend 5 flights of stairs to throw out trash or empty vessels. Everything flies down. Slops, leftovers, sewage, broken pottery, rotten vegetables. All of this falls onto the heads of random passers-by in the darkness. If a heavy ceramic amphora falls on your head, it will be the end of your journey. But that is only half the trouble. The most dangerous thing in night Rome is the total lack of police. There are no law enforcement officers in the city to patrol the alleys for the protection of citizens. Your safety is exclusively your problem. In this impenetrable darkness, the city changes masters. Professional gangs of muggers who specialize in robbery emerge from their hiding places. But another category of night predators is far more terrifying for you. In Rome, there existed a so-called fashion for night strolls among the bored, drunken, golden youth from among the noble patricians. For them, beating up or murdering a random passerby was a kind of evening amusement, a way to prove their prowess and impunity. You hear the noise of an approaching crowd, loud laughter, the clinking of cups, songs, a group of young aristocrats in expensive togas, staggering from the wine they've drunk, moves right down the center of the street. They have torches in their hands that blind you. They are looking for entertainment. If they notice you, a lonely and clearly foreign person, they will not have a shadow of a doubt. They might simply amuse themselves by beating you to death with their sticks, or for a joke, throw you into the nearest ditch full of mud. You have no weapon, you have no protection, you have no witnesses. There is no justice system in Rome that would look for the killer of an ordinary person if their victim was struck down by someone from the wealthy class. Your life on this night is worth less than a cup of the cheapest wine diluted with vinegar. You freeze, pressing into a niche in the wall, trying not to breathe until this wave of drunken fury passes by. Your hands shake. You realize that reaching your cubicle in the Insula today is not just a walk, it is a true miracle. You feel someone stirring in the darkness behind your back again. This entire city, with its marble gleam, the grandeur of its forums, and the power of its legions, transforms at night into a huge, foul-smelling predatory trap for anyone who does not possess their own army of slaves or the sturdy walls of a protected house. You reach your insula, stumble inside, and slide the flimsy bolt on the door, knowing perfectly well that it will not save you from thieves. You collapse onto the dirty mattress, listening to the crackle of coals in the neighbor's brazier, and close your eyes, dreaming of only one thing: waking up in your own time, where there is light, clean water, and laws that protect your life, at least a little. If this story helped you immerse yourself in the atmosphere of the past and gave you food for thought before going to sleep, be sure to subscribe to the Magister Vladislav channel and like this video. Your support is what allows me to find and bring to life such rare chronicles. And be sure to write in the comments whether you think modern people, accustomed to comfort and safety, could hold out for at least 3 days in this chaos, where at every step either poison, a collapse, or a knife blow in the dark awaits you. It is very important for me to know your opinion. Good night, and may your home be truly safe.